Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to our live streamed living room conversation talking about race and ethnicity. So, I am Brielle Ringer. I am a conversation guide and a team member at Living Room Conversations. I'm our racial and equity partner, and really excited to be facilitating an awesome conversation between some really amazing guests tonight. And typically our conversations are 90 minutes long, but tonight you get like a little abbreviated taste of a living room conversation. So we're gonna have a 60-minute convo exploring our own experiences with race and ethnicity, reflecting on our upbringings around race, how conversations were talked about or not talked about around this topic, maybe our vision for racial equity, and really just getting to dive into our personal experiences. And that's what the heart of a living room conversation is. It's not about debating. It's not about opinions or the different facts that we have. It's about your personal experience. So I'm really excited for you to basically be like a fly on the wall of seeing what it looks like to participate in a living room conversation. And we're hoping to really inspire you to then go on and have your own convo, and we'll tell you more about that later. So the conversation that we're having tonight is from our conversation guide, Race and Ethnicity. This is pulled from one of the many conversational pathways that we have talking about race. And so this conversational pathway is, where do I start? Usually it starts with two conversations before this one on race and ethnicity. It would begin with a conversation about empathy, and then go into a conversation about either social identity and status and privilege, and then ending with race and ethnicity. But we really wanted you to get to the heart of the conversation tonight. So we're going to dive right into race and ethnicity. And for those of you, the conversation pathways, we really created them because we know that sometimes it takes a little bit of working up your courage and confidence before you're ready to talk about race. And so we wanted to offer some different ways that you could build up and work up to that conversation. So I'm going to start off by giving the floor over to our fabulous guests tonight and give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. So whoever feels called to jump right in and take about a minute or two to introduce and get the guests familiar with who you are and what you're up to. Egberto, I think you're muted. It looks like you're desiring to speak.
I am Egberto Willis. I'm the host of a radio show called Politics Done Right. I'm originally from Central America and came to the United States to go to college. My introduction to the United States was kind of interesting into a little town called Brenham, Texas. And that is where I learned about things like epithets and so forth. After walking with a whole bunch of Latino friends that very few people realize it. But I tell you what, one of the things that I realized in coming to this country is that it's all about what you do with what has happened to you. And I mean, some people do it, some people don't. But anyhow, on coming here, what I decided to do with my life is to be a part of the solution, not a part of necessarily the problems. We can always come out here and talk about all the things that have happened to us, or we can come out and say, yes, these things have happened to us, but let's go ahead and move forward, do something about it, be active about it, and henceforth, all that I've decided to do going forward is to make a difference in the entire body politic.
Beautiful. So my name is Aurora Archer. I am the co-founder, one half of the co-founding duo of the Opt-in. I am an Afro-Latina. My pronouns are she, her. I am the product of a Mexican immigrant mother who was a housekeeper and an African-American cook father. both of my parents were domestics. So I had the incredible opportunity of growing up in between worlds from the moment that I was able to walk, because I not only traversed the cultural tapestry of a Mexican immigrant heritage, but also that of an African American family, while also having an incredible opportunity to peer into the lives and um, into the lives of very, very wealthy white people that my parents served as domestics for. So I took that keen ability to observe people, to observe cultures, and created a 20 plus corporate career in which I led marketing strategy and business transformation for some of the most incredible Fortune 100 global companies. And then took the expertise that I learned in those arenas to become an entrepreneur 4 years ago, not only starting the Opt-in, but also starting my own marketing and strategy firm and doing what I love best, which is driving meaningful change and disruption that centers humanness and humanity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Croce Sorg. I go by she and her. And I grew up white and wealthy and willfully ignorant. My life is radically changed because of my relationship with Aurora. We were friends for 10 years, and about 3 or 4 years ago, when White Fragility came out, she gifted me that book. And at the time, I thought she was giving it to me because I was like, on that side of the fence, like a cool white person, woke white person. And I realized when I read it, I was filled with shame. I was turning every page just like, oh my gosh, I am that white person. And so is everyone in my family and every friend of mine. And how was I not conscious to this? And if I was unconscious of this, I fancy myself a curious person that wants to work on themselves and evolve and all of these things. And there must be other white people out there that want to do better as well. And so Aurora and I started the Opt-in now 3 years ago as a way to model our relationship, to have uncomfortable conversations about race, to join in on a journey of dismantling racism, because, things could be really different, and white people are in charge of all of the systems disproportionately everywhere. And if we could change and transform in some way, that there would be just a vastly different world. We would all just be so much better off. Thanks for having me, Brielle.
Thank you for being here.
I'll pop in next. First of all, I'd like to begin with some land acknowledgements. I sit and I'm broadcasting from the traditional homelands of the Lenape and the Shawnee, Wyandot, Miami, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and many Great Lakes tribes. I'd like to begin with what is a traditional greeting. I am a Indigenous Chamorro feminist scholar and organizer, and the traditional greeting goes as follows. Buenas Havaday, Guahusi Professor, Antoinette Satfus McDaniel, Familian Kapili, Zansungi, Tau Tau Tamuning, Zan Baragara. I basically have said hello and welcome and gave you my lineage. I am descended from the clan of the Kapili clan on my maternal side, and the Chungi clan, which relates to white hair or light skin, also light skin. On my father's side, my parents were from Tamuning, the village of Tamuning and Baragata on the island. Again, I am a first generation. I'm part of a larger diaspora. The Chamorro people are from Guahan, known to most people as Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands, located in the Northwestern Pacific. Because of militarization, many are Chamorros at this point in time. There are more of us in the diaspora, primarily the states, the 48 contiguous states, as well as Hawaii. And there's a history about our settlement patterns. So I was the daughter of a non-commissioned enlisted man, a chief, served in the military for 20 some years, raised kids with my mother, who worked as a secretary. I'm a first-generation faculty member. I never imagined in a million years that I would become a professor, let alone attend Yale University as a doctoral student in sociology. And also, while we were talking and I was meditating on the topic, it occurs to me that I was actually one of the first, I believe I was the very first graduate student in the Department of Sociology, one of the oldest departments in the United States, in all the American universities, to propose and to take a comprehensive exam on race and ethnicity as its own subject matter. So I've spent essentially my adult life from the time I was 17 until, you don't need to know, but it's been a few decades, teaching about race, having conversations, difficult conversations. I can say that even though, as far as institutions go, I cannot say that I'm optimistic about change. And there's a lot of demographic changes that are also causing a lot of division in our culture. And it's often not helped by some of the dominant narratives. But as an educator, I can avow that I do see people's minds changed. What it takes is for us to continue to be committed to change. So with that, just a couple of final things. I recently am very proud that I co-chaired the inaugural Chamorro Pathways Through Higher Education, a webinar and a follow-on. Many people are not aware that even though Pacific Islanders are included in the again, a number of diversity initiatives, a lot of folks do not know who we are. And we are underrepresented at similar rates for Black and Latinos. So thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation with my colleagues.
Well, thank you all so much. And my name is Hassan Gyasi. I'm the founder of Aristotle's Cafe. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. My father is from Iran. My mother's an American, raised Jewish. Growing up, I saw some big disagreements, but I also realized that when there was love, respect, and effective techniques, people find ways to come together. And for the past 16 years across 3 continents, I've been on a mission to vaccinate people against hatred. I do this by improving community, state, and national discourse with my approach to facilitation, questions, communication, and empathy. And I offer training to individuals and companies that want to learn how to have more discussions that matter. I really believe that the quality of the questions we ask determines the quality of our lives. And I am very thankful for being part of this discussion today and really excited to share the stage with everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And just want to uplift Antoinette for shaking up the, standard English and also bringing the Indigenous land acknowledgements. You inspired me because I just recently moved and I haven't, looked at what is the Indigenous land that I'm occupying. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. So I'm on Muskogee Indigenous land in what is now known as Marietta, Georgia. Just recently moved here from Michigan. And my name is Brielle Ringer. As I shared, I'm the racial equity partner at Living Room Conversations. And in addition to this work, I am also a holistic health coach with my business, Be Well with Brielle. And, I'm really now in a space of weaving these intersections. And so one way that I do that is through really intentionally making wellness and healing accessible through the Black Women's Healing Fund, which I created. It's a scholarship program where I offer holistic healing and health opportunities for Black women, getting free and journeying within, because I'm a big believer that our personal transformation is integral to our collective liberation. And so making spaces for people to come home to themselves, really. And, the intersections of that mindfulness work and the racial equity work is finding ways for us to breathe and ground into our bodies when we're navigating this difficult conversation. So I'm actually going to invite us to do that right now, because when we're talking about race and ethnicity, we don't know what can be triggered in our personal experiences, whether we're having the conversation or you're witnessing the conversation. So let's just take a moment to, if you feel comfortable, to close down your eyes. And if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, that's okay too. And just noticing the natural rhythm and pace of your breath. And then gradually allowing your breath to lengthen and deepen. And as you're breathing, allowing your breath to come from your belly, letting that belly rise and fill with air with each inhale. And slowly letting the belly come in as you exhale. And just knowing that at any point, if you start to notice tension or tightness in your body, it might be a sign physiologically of being triggered. If you notice your breath start to quicken, your heart rate starting to quicken, that you can come home to your breath and slow things down and regroup and engage with the conversation when you're feeling more ready to. Whenever you're ready, you can open back up your eyes, fully arrived to this moment. So we will go ahead and continue into the conversation agreements. And I'm going to kick us off with the first conversation agreement, and then I'll have folks go in a line, and we'll go from myself to Egberto, to Aurora, to Kelly, to Hassan, and to Antoinette. So the first conversation agreement, these are the heart of a living room conversation, by the way, that really makes this work. Be curious and listen to understand. And Egberto, if you can take the next one that's in the chat. And unmuting yourself would be very helpful.
Show respect and suspend judgment.
Note any common ground as well as any differences.
Be authentic and welcome that from others.
Be purposeful.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Be purposeful and to the point. I think that this one was really meant for me, Hassan.
Own and guide the conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. So now we have the opportunity to kind of explore our own values. We're going into round one of the questions of our guide tonight. And so you can each take the opportunity to answer one of the following questions. What are your hopes and concerns for your family, community, and or the country? What would your best friend say about who you are? What sense of purpose, mission, or duty guides you in your life? So go ahead, and whoever feels like they want to hop right in and take that on.
I'm going to start with purpose. What purpose guides me? And I tell you, it's interesting because when I gave up my software company to do political activism and radio hosting, etc., many people thought that it was sort of crazy to do that. And I said, usually we sit down in front of a mirror and we say, wow, something is happening. Somebody needs to do something about this. And one night I remember sitting back down, pitch darkness, and saying, wait a minute, we're always saying somebody else has to do it. If you are always saying somebody else has to do it, who is that somebody?
Yeah.
And then I said, well, maybe that somebody ought to be me. So I felt a purpose that I needed to do something in this very difficult society, in this kind of a ranctious society that started to form. And from moving on to the coffee party and other organizations where we were able to do positive good, where we were able to bring people together, it more and more became the mission. And I felt it that it is something where, however little, I could actually make a difference.
Antoinette, would you like to hop in?
Sure. It's interesting, this question. I think I have a different answer at this point in my life. I'm sort of starting the next part of my life, going from having always seen myself as a scholar activist, with my activism really being about my pedagogy, about making space for people in the classroom to talk about difficult things like race and ethnicity and inequality. But at this point, essentially, I see myself as a scholar community organizer. And I was very lucky as a result, this sounds odd, but as a result of the pandemic, I was able to start taking free online classes in my own language. a language which my parents in our own island were prevented from learning or speaking, and were actually punished, beaten and shamed, sometimes by Chamorro teachers. So since that time, I've found this amazing community of diasporic Chamorro millennials. And I keep telling them, it's like, where have you been for the last 30 years? And so my purpose, along with seeing that my daughter continues to do her work and support her in any way I can. She's a portrait artist who does work on trauma. It's really to sort of have these conversations with young people who really have never been seen. That is really precious to me when I hear them saying auntie for us Tija. It means so much. No one's ever seen me. And there's, so I think for this part of my life, I'm really looking forward to being able to nurture some of these folks and have the kind of conversations I've had for 20 some years in American universities.
So thank you. I'm going to take the liberty. One of the questions was, how would your best friend describe you? And I'm actually going to take the liberty to describe my best friend. And so, when I see Kelly, I see and experience an incredible energy, a smart woman. She is a voracious reader. I think she reads about 6 to 8 books a week. But I see a white woman who is steadfastly digging deep into her history, into her trauma, into everything, and excavating it courageously. And excavating it to find truth, to find the truth in her life, to serve as her beacon of transformation, to unlearn much of what she believed to be true in the past, and to activate people that look like her into this same journey so that she can be a catalyst for change and creating the world that we all want to see, that she would love to see, that actually centers equity for Black people, equity for brown people, equity for all people. That's who I see.
Whew. Well, in case you didn't realize it, Aurora is the type of person that makes you want to be exactly who she sees you as. She is the most incredible mystic, a challenger of thought and belief, and just a capacity for love that I really didn't see in a lot of humans until I met her, and experience until I met her. I didn't know what the word humanity really meant until I met her. And she not only exemplifies humanity, but she has the utmost integrity. She is an incredible coach in every way. She is a creator of brilliant work that serves everybody. And she is in the process of healing such a beautiful soul that has experienced so much and has so much to give and so much to come through her.
That was beautiful. Thank you all for adding that cute spin.
I don't know how to follow that. I need to get someone in here with me to hang out with more. And I need a really good friend soon. But the question that I jumped into was that I pulled from kind of this guide is, what sense of purpose, mission, or duty guide your life? And I think for me as human beings, we want to fix things that we see that are broken. For me, I was horrible at communicating. I had a really big problem with communicating. I couldn't speak in front of people. I would never do something like this. And somehow I was silly enough to get my master's in communication. I think part of that is because we see what's broken and we work to fix it. And growing up, I saw a lot of people that didn't have a voice, whether it was about age or race or education or whatever it might be. And I think for me, just throughout my experiences, I just always knew that it was really important for me to create spaces. And Antoinette mentioned it too. And it seems like we all have been doing this work in one way or the other, which is really amazing, of lifting people up that normally don't have the chance to be heard or listened to. And I think the really nice thing about that is that inside of fixing that thing that I saw that was broken, you find more passion, you find more answers that keep driving you down that road. And so I think that's just something that I want to share. And for anyone else that sees things that are broken, you know, start fixing them. And those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you all. So my sense of purpose in my life, you know, who I am is the possibility of peace, transformation, and liberation. And so finding the ways that I can step into that each day and through the many facets of my work. And so whether that is supporting people on their vegan journey, you know, aligning with transitioning to a diet that aligns with their values and adds years to their life, or if that's, you know, coming home to themselves in yoga and meditation and, you know, bringing people together virtually right now for beloved community and really having that space to be witnessed in sharing themselves vulnerably. And so I feel like the heart of what I really do is connection. So whether it is connecting to oneself and understanding and knowing oneself better, or whether it's connection to the earth and getting people out in nature and like answering the call to bring the women to the water and, you know, surrender to the natural rhythm of the earth, or it's connecting with one another and being vulnerable and sharing with one another. So I'm glad that I get the opportunity to be in alignment with that purpose and have being in conversation and connection and community with each of y'all tonight. So thank you all so much for sharing. We're to go ahead and now get into the main part of our conversation, starting to now dive into race and ethnicity. And I will just read kind of the opening paragraph for this conversation guide. And if you're following along on YouTube or wherever you are, our moderators are going to put that in the chat so you can get a sense of the conversation that we're about to have. So the expressed American ideal is the creation of a society that is fair and has opportunity for all, regardless of individual or group identity. Even as we work to build a nation that reflects that ideal, here we go. Even as we work to build a nation that reflects those ideals, there are challenges to living into its fullest expression. This conversation is an opportunity to explore our experience of race and ethnicity. Where are we? What do we aspire to for ourselves and our community? So now we're going to have the opportunity for each participant to have about 2 minutes to answer one of the following questions from the guide. Were conversations about race a part of your upbringing? If so, how was the subject approached? How did the people around you talk about other races? Do you feel race has an impact on your daily life? And if so, how? Have you ever been accused of being racist? How did that make you feel? Did it affect the way you think or act? Why or why not? And what would a society that values racial and ethnic differences look like? What hopes and fears come up for you as you think about that society? So whoever would like to hop right in and take that one of those questions on.
What would a society that values racial and ethnic differences look like? I would say that it is what we've aspired for because we haven't yet seen it. So what it would look like is what all of us that are sitting here are hoping that it would be. I've heard and while we had a discussion that some of us may not be as hopeful, I am actually very hopeful based on the experiences that I've been having. On my radio show, Politics Done Right, I have a wide audience of both folks on the left, right, middle, every ethnicity, etc. And what I find is that if the communication is done in a particular manner where people feel that they're being listened to, that they actually respond. And one of the ways one can figure those things out is if they're returning every day to talk to you, in as much as you're not necessarily like them, something must be right there. So I am hopeful. I think that once we start not thinking of America as a melting pot, I don't know about you, but I'm from Central America. I like I love my sancocho, and I like my arroz con pollo, but I also like to go to an Italian restaurant, and I like to have me some soul food. And I like to have a different taste of everything. I don't want to melt it all into one thing and then just eat that slop. I love to see, we are looking at a screen right now with a whole bunch of people that look very differently. And I love it. We're all humans, and what we see is the beauty of differences. And I think one of the problems that we have in society is that too often we're looking for sameness instead of the equality of differences. In other words, you can be different and equal. You can be, and I think one of the issues where we talk about what gives us fear. The fear is that we are not able to put that message out. The fear is that we are able to allow others to manipulate our psyche in such a manner that that message doesn't come through. So I think as long as we're able to say or to prove, I'm an engineer, so I'm always talking about proofs and formulas and math. As long as we're able to do that, I think in the long run, we come out ahead. And the thing about it is, if it's done the right way, even I've spoken to some of the most, what we would call racist people that have actually come around. So I have a lot of hope. I'm very hopeful.
Okay, I'm gonna follow on, Egberto, and I want to just resoundingly affirm your idea of not melting, being happy and excited about being who we are, but also being able to be in community with a variety of people as we are here. And I also want to clarify that I am hopeful. I wanted to make a distinction between being optimistic and being hopeful. This is kind of being optimistic, according to Cornel West, from a book that's been around many decades now. He makes the point that being an optimist is based on looking at the existing conditions and saying, okay, based on what I'm looking at, things look good. They're going to get better. No problem. I think there's a lot that, there are many days that aside from quarantine, my heart is heavy for our country, for so many communities. So I'm not particularly optimistic. However, hopefulness is based on willing to fight for a dream, to fight for the kind of society that you described. So I just wanted to mention that. The question I'm going to take on is about how growing up and how conversations about race shaped who I am. First of all, I mentioned that my father, like so many other Chamorro fathers and grandfathers at this point, since I'm getting old, were in the military and moved to the diaspora for work. And so consequently, even though I was born on the island, my first memories are of San Diego, and a place that I realized later was kind of ironically named, or not so ironically named, Paradise Hills, being from the Pacific. And when we went back to the island and I started Guam, I was so excited to realize a few years ago that my first two teachers were Chamorro women. Very excited. It's San Vicente, Sister Elaine, Sister Gloria, if you're out there. All right, let me get to the story. So we moved in 1970. Showed up freezing in Virginia, and I've lived in Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, and Ohio. That wasn't cold, but it was cold coming right from the island. And I had a classmate whose name I still remember. His name was Leon Sykes. And he was another third grader, a young Black boy. And he came up to me, and I apologize, I am going to use some epithets, but I'm using them advisedly. And he said to me, are you a Jap? Or are you a Chink? And years later, as a sociologist, I thought about that conversation again. For him, race was imposed. Race was never negotiable for him. We were not that far away from Jim Crow. And that really shaped my experience. My family settled in San Diego. And yes, my parents talked about whiteness. because my father and my mother grew up or worked in settings where being brown people, you were assumed that you weren't that smart. You were assumed not to be as capable. And my parents, particularly my father, was brilliant. It took me years to even recognize, because I worked with another faculty member, Donna Ford from Ohio State, who does work on gifted children who are children of color. It's like, oh my gosh, because of the lack of that frame, it never occurred to me to look at my father and realize my father had an extremely high IQ. He was extremely gifted, but I couldn't have known that because it wasn't framed in that way. So those conversations, again, not just with my parents, but with my peers, really did shape my path into sociology, where I finally started being able to ask questions and figure out, where does my family fit? Where do I fit in this society? And also, how can I be, as a scholar, part of addressing and highlighting those issues and helping us have hard conversations. So those who are willing to will fight for a hopeful vision.
I'll go. I'm going to take the have you ever been accused of being racist? And wow, is that like growing up, that would have been the worst thing you could have possibly been called. And it's ironic because I spent my entire life being and acting so racist, but never being called out or accused of it because I was in such white spaces all the time. And it wasn't until I started doing my own work and being in more cross-racial relationship, which has been way more recent, just the last few years, where that I actually have been called in lovingly in my racism, because my perception used to be that racism or being racist was, really overt acts and violent acts against people of color, Black people, Indigenous people. And what I come to learn is that it really was my personality. I mean, I had been conditioned in white supremacy culture where it was, I got accolades for being competitive and power hoarding, and the right to my comfort was always top of mind. I was defensive, and there was always a sense of urgency, and there was only one right way in my house. So all of these characteristics kind of come together, and they are altogether very racist, but I didn't understand them to be so um, when before I like woke the heck up to understand what my cultural conditioning was, and how white the spaces I was in. So, is there a second part to it? How did it make me feel? Oof. Well, when it happened, like when I've been accused of being racist more currently, I felt terrible. I felt so terrible. And it definitely affected the way I think or act, because at the time it was like, oh, I was caught. Like I knew better, and I was tired, and I was like just urgent, and I did not give the person the right time of day, or I didn't give them enough. I just didn't give them enough attention. I didn't treat them as an equal, and I was ashamed that I knew better and I didn't do better. Um, yeah, yeah.
So I am going to take the question, do you feel that race impacts your daily life? So as I heard you share that question, Brielle, I thought to myself, I actually can't think of a moment in my life when I was not engaged or being impacted by race. I think of my childhood, and one of the most vivid memories that I have is that I actually never saw my mother look rested. Like my mother always was the mom that had bags underneath her eyes. And the reason was that my father, as a domestic, as someone that had 2 to 3 jobs, he never was home like at a 9 to 5 job. That would, my dad had a 9 to 5 that then morphed into a 5:30 to 10 that then morphed into, and so she never rested until my father was safely home. Because growing up in San Antonio, Texas, things happened. And, things happened to my uncles, things happened to my father that are no different than many of the incidents and horrible, horrible activities that we see continuing to um, happen to Black and brown bodies. I recall very vividly my father being pulled out of our family car and beaten within inches of his life. We were lucky that day. And so as a child, all of those conversations and all of those memories are still quite vivid to me. And then when I think of my life as an adult and as an executive in corporate America, yeah, every day I opened the door into that corporate campus. Yeah, I knew I was a Black, Latina, female, um, fighting for her seat at the table to ensure that her voice got heard, and that it was also for me extremely critical and important that it wasn't just my voice that got heard, but the voice of everyone that was brown and Black. Because as the handful of few, it was critical that we made our presence known and that we took up the space that we more than deserved having, and that we created and innovated and showed the impact of our excellence. We showed the impact of our creativity, and that we showed the impact of our intellect. And so now, if I fast forward to my frame today, and as a mother, yeah, there's not a day that I don't wake up thinking about my son, thinking about what might or may not happen to him every day he walks out of our home, as an entrepreneur who is actively engaged in our cities, bringing equity into the entrepreneurship landscape in the city of Philadelphia. I think about the opportunities and the access that so many of our brown and Black, um, unbelievable, amazing, intellectual, innovative entrepreneurs don't have. And so, how do I create that voice? How do I support that access? How do I fight for that equity? And so, and then when I look at my aging mother and I look at our healthcare system and I look at what we've just experienced as a society with COVID, I worry about those of us that all the Black and brown bodies that continue to be left behind. And so I am hopeful, I am determined, and I am woefully doubling down on making sure that we make it different. We make it different.
It's such an important subject, and I'm used to being on the side of just questioning or not sharing, but I want to go into that same question that Aurora picked, and what a powerful thing that has been said from everyone. For me, this question of, do you feel your race impacts your daily life, and how? Absolutely. I think, of course, it does for all of us. I mean, I'm at a very young age, I was asked if I was American a lot, which isn't, not in a mean way. People are just curious. They just wanted to know, if a guy named Hassan was American, or where I might be from. People still ask me, where are you from? And I don't know how to answer that question. And I think on the positive side of it, as I've gone through my life and I've had the chance to live in different countries, people look at me and they might think I look like their brother or their son or their cousin, right? They welcome me in because I look like them. And on the other side, right, we have those moments where we're othered, or where we're an enemy of some sort because the way that we look, it's imposed on us, right? It's not our choice that race affects us. And I think definitely after 9/11, the name Hassan took on a completely different meaning for a lot of Americans. and for a lot of people around the world. And so, you know, I think that it's really obvious that race has to impact us on a regular basis because of the way, because differences, because as humans we pick out differences, because sometimes we celebrate them and sometimes we fear them. And I think part of the reason why I was invited onto this panel was to talk a little bit about my experience abroad. And one thing that I do want to say is that race exists everywhere. You know, these issues exist everywhere. It's not in a vacuum in America, right? It's in Thailand in different ways. It's in Germany in different ways. It's all around the world, unfortunately. And I think that for that reason, we're always looking to find these differences. And so I'm hoping that the way that race impacts people now and in the future starts to become more of those common bonds and those moments where we feel like a common family as opposed to enemies. So those are my thoughts on that question.
Thank you all. I just, find myself so enthralled with each person's story and their share, and grateful for you all bringing forth vulnerability. So I'm going to speak to the question of conversations about race being a part of my upbringing. So I am biracial. My mother's side of the family is white. My father's side of the family is Black. And I mostly grew up with my mom's side of the family. And so in a very rural white town in the Upper Peninsula, and I can't recall conversations about race being a part of, that side of my family. And I, talking to my aunts later on now in my adulthood about that, and they're just like, oh, well, you were just a girl in our family. You weren't a Black girl in our family. We just saw you as, we don't see color, kind of taking on that color blindness. And I was like, I hear your heart in that. Like, I hear what you mean, but like what that really lands for me is that like an inability to fully see me. And not only, the challenges that come along with my experience of being one of the few people of color in my predominantly white family, and growing up in a K through 12 school where I'm the only Black person, graduating from that kind of school. And, like it would have been helpful for us to acknowledge that. And not only that challenge, but like the beauty in my Blackness, and like what to do with my hair. Like, so there weren't a lot of conversations about race in my upbringing. And I kind of went out to claim my own racial and ethnic identity when I went off to college, and was also closer to my father's side of the family, like connecting with them a little bit deeper. But, even when I was growing up, my mom was a bit more cultured than, say, the rest of the white side of my family. And so at one point, when I was in 6th grade, I went to predominantly like Middle Eastern and Arab school. And where I was kind of like, again, not the predominant demographic. And there was a year where I went to a like predominantly Black school. So I had like these experiences of different cultures and races as a child. And when I think about that question of how people talked about other races growing up, I remember being with one of my family members on the Black side of my family. And this was like at the time that I was in the predominantly Middle Eastern and Arab school. Mind you, it was like one of the best school experiences I had. Such welcoming families and community that just, brought me right in so beautifully. And I remember we were going to a donut shop, and my family member was like, oh, there's too many Arabic people in there. And I was like, how many people say that about Black people? Like, how would you feel if someone said that about us? If our family was sitting in a donut shop and they felt uncomfortable to go in, and it's like, and I remember actually challenging that because I had this experience being 11 or 12 years old and being around different cultures. So I feel grateful that I've had that experience, and to be able to now create spaces for other people to have conversations. So that is a little bit about kind of my upbringing and conversations around race. So now that we've had the opportunity to hear from each of the panelists, I am mindful of time. However, I also want to decolonize time and honor that there's so much goodness that's been shared here. and that if panelists want to follow up with something else that was shared here, if you want to ask a follow-up question, if there's another point that you want to raise that feels really burning for you, I want to honor that and hold space for that. So I'll open the floor up. Yes, please go ahead, Antoinette.
Yeah, I'm really mindful of how I'm touched by your conversation and also Aurora's experience of being mixed race. I'd like to tie it back to a couple of things. One, sort of finally, after 30 years as being the first or only, and always being the only Pacific Islander scholar or woman in every institution I've ever taught at. And having experienced so much violence around isolation. I want to talk a little bit about mahaling, or what in Chamorro means yearning. The yearning on the part of people who are not seen. I talked with a young woman who I met again in this online class, and she's in her 40s. And she talked about the fact, this is somebody who was really engaged in politics in New York City. Right. And she said, I was crushed when she told me that I was only the second person in her life that she'd ever been able to talk about mixed race with. And I was crushed by that, crushed because thinking on the one hand, I've spent my life teaching about mixed race and trying to support people about that. I have a mixed race daughter. I know the complications as a mother, where my daughter could be white passing, and in a society where the color of her skin could protect her, the saddest thing for a mother to say is, I'd rather she be protected because she looks white. What does that mean for someone who's been involved in anti-racist work her entire life? Right? What does that look like? So I'd like to talk a little bit, what you raised in terms of mixed race brings up a couple of things for me. The idea of thinking intersectionally, and I know it's almost a cliche, but it's really important that we understand, even within our own communities, there are differences in experiences, that even within the Chamorro community, being mixed race is a thing, being what folks call gayla, which is a Chamorrization of the term gay, or LGBTQ, is a different experience. And at the same time, I also want to talk about the importance of doing coalition work. I was on the editorial committee staff of OPAL, which is the Ohio Progressive Asian Women's Leadership Group. And I was so thrilled after almost 20 some years in Ohio to find they're progressives, they're women, they're Asian, and focus on Asian Pacific Islanders. It's like, I'm there. I had to find them on, it was very meaningful to me. But we published I want to give a shout out to, it was called Quarantine Pandemic Stories. And it was really wonderful because it wasn't just about people talking about spikes in anti-Asian violence, which we need to talk about. It wasn't just about the 4 women that I recruited. There were 4 pieces. I was so proud to be in that space because 4 Chamorro women submitted poetry. They were seen. That mahaling was seen. We all talked about colonization. What was happening to us in the diaspora not being seen was also still connected to the island. Colonization, militarization right now. But it was also a beautiful thing because in our launch, I saw Black women, I saw recent immigrants from Asia who are artists. We had visual artists, we had poets, we had queer folks, we had trans folks. And I think we really need to talk about both the importance of coalition and the importance of intersectionality within our communities and across communities. So your comment about mixed race brought that to mind. And I just want to say, I'm so in love with the rising generation of millennials. I'm probably the oldest one here. I call myself a Nenny boomer. Nenny, Chamorro, you know, Spanish were there for a while, right? But I'm just so, that is a basis of my hope, knowing all these incredible people, including the folks in this panel are here, but I think we need to talk about mixed race. We need to talk about queerness. We need to talk about access to healthcare. We need to talk about history. You know, obviously we don't have the time in this one conversation, but please keep going beyond this conversation. Keep reading and keep asking, excavating your own heart, and ask yourself, what have I learned that I want to unlearn? And it's not just white people, it's people of color too, that we've learned about ourselves and we've learned about other people as well, who are also people of color. We need to excavate that, address it, and fix it. Damn it.
Thank you so much. Any other okay, Egberto, yes.
Real quick, first of all, I want to piggyback off of something that Antoinette just said about it's not only white people, it is us too. Because first of all, oppression is a magical thing that you actually start to instantiate that of which white folk think. In other words, just like they may think you are inferior, that metastasizes into your psyche that make you believe that you're inferior as well. But the thing that I today on my show, somebody said when I was about to show two subjects to show what Black bodies go through, specifically Black men to police officers. And this guy, he's a great guy, conservative. He talks all the time and he's a supporter of the show, all of that. And he said, I guess we are in race card time. And then I looked at him and I said, well, you know, you have to realize we live this every day. And I think if there's one thing our white brothers and sisters watching this right now should understand is if you are not a white person, you always have to. If you are a person of color, not thinking about race when you're out there, then you're doing a disservice to yourself. And you could possibly hurt yourself. And when Antoinette said, it's a beautiful statement about her daughter and whether, given that her daughter can pass, sometimes it's concerned. My answer to that is sometimes it is survival. So we should remember that nobody should have, if their psyche is correct, nobody should worry if at times they have to use that thing, passing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other burning thoughts before we go into this final round to wrap up and close out?
I just want to say shout out to Coalition, Antoinette. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because I believe that that's a huge part of our hope. And I think it's a huge part of us actually creating the change that we want to see. It's not going to happen separately. It's going to happen by us coming together. And so I just want to emphasize for everyone out there, coalition, positive love, coalition.
Can you actually tell folks what that looks like in your own life, Aurora, for someone who might not know?
I think it's about continuously looking to create bridges and connections with those that look like you, those that do not look like you. I would offer especially those that do not look like you, and calling in from not just the mind, but from the heart. Because, you know, Antoinette talked about that yearning. I think Kelly and I believe in part of one of our premises on the opt-in is that I think we're all yearning. I think there is a yearning deep in each one of us as a spiritual being to be connected. I think we are more aligned to being connected versus not being connected. Mm-hmm. And I believe that that is the basis of our humanness, our spiritual essence, and our coalition together.
Thank you all so much for all of the wonderful things that you shared. We're going to go ahead and do a quick round 3 of just wrapping up this conversation. And I'm going to let Hassan go first before he has to sneak out of our conversation, since I'm doing a little decolonizing of time and going a couple minutes over. We started a few minutes late. We're going to go a few minutes over, So final round, what was most meaningful or valuable to you in this conversation? What learning, new understanding, or common ground was found on the topic? How has this conversation changed your perception of anyone in this group, including yourself? And is there a next step that you would like to take based upon the conversation that we just had?
Thanks. Yeah, I really want to dive into that is there a next step you'd like to take based upon the conversation you just had? And I think, to echo what Antoinette and Aurora talked about, I think it is about coalition, about coming together and finding other people that are working in this space, finding other people that are, bringing others together. And for me personally, I talked about kind of my purpose. And for me, my theory of change is that the more discussions that matter that we have, the better the world will be. It's not a Band-Aid that you put over something that's, been injured. It's actually a habit that you develop. So I'm really enthusiastic to keep holding these free weekly discussions for Aristoteles Cafe that I've had. It's open to everybody. People can drop in anytime that they want. And also helping teach people how to facilitate conversations in life or at work or in their companies or in their communities, because I think it is true. People are really yearning to come together. No one likes to be in conflict. No one likes to have, hatred in their heart or pain throughout the world. So I think, this just really makes me excited to continue what I've been doing and really happy and honored to share the stage with everyone. So thanks.
Okay, silence. I guess I'll go. What was most meaningful, valuable to you in this living room conversation? My quick answer is going to be Kelly. And what I mean by that is what we need in society right now. I can go ahead and I can preach and I can talk and we can go on shows or whatever. But the first thing I have to get across is the wall created by my Blackness. When you have an ally like Kelly who can explain in her own terms how things are, she can prevent that necessary step in times where that necessary step is not possible. So in seeing that we have people like her willing to engage, that is something that is valuable, that is something that is meaningful. And with that, I'll shut up.
Wow. Thank you, Egberto. That was really touching. And I just am so honored and really deeply moved to be here in community with you all. What I've learned from this is that I love you all so deeply. Like, I can't wait to spend more time with you. Antoinette, I love how you said before we got on, and you had said that you were cooperating with not with your own disappearance.
You were
and
no longer
cooperating with your own disappearance. And it made me realize how much I did not know about Pacific Islanders. I mean, less than zero. And you make me want to learn so much more. So thank you.
Appreciate that.
And I'm just going to piggyback off of what Kelly said. I just wish we could go on for another hour. You will be receiving a ping from us because we want to stay in community. Each of you is an incredible, incredible activist, light worker, and human being. And it's been a complete honor and pleasure. Thank you for the learnings and the guidance that each of you brought to the conversation this evening.
I'll go next. Thank you. Yeah, I'm always very touched to see people continuing to do work on really hard things. There's a way in which my experiences in the academy and far too many women of color and Indigenous women have been full of trauma, and people don't really know that. And, it's not about people will say, oh, you're crying victim. No, it's like, you don't understand. Settler colonization is based on erase and replace. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been erased and replaced, almost like, okay, so at what point are they going to fire me? Because if I'm who I am, it becomes threatening, not because I'm not a nice person or don't know my stuff, but there's a way in which things are not. Really need to think about how institutions are structured and what the kind of work we need to do to not just envision changing the structures, but opening them up to be more humane. So I want to thank you for that. And the very last thing I have to share is I do want to remind people that we are still an empire. Guam is one of the 17 last colonial possessions according to the United Nations. My people still do not have the right to vote in presidential elections. The US Congress basically determines our fate. And again, we come into the United States in 1898. So from Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, through Turtle Island, through the Pacific, where America's day begins, there's still so much work to do. So please continue to do this work, ask questions, sit in humility, and also have courage. I've always found that they seem, contradictory, but we both need to have courage and humility to continue. And we need the love of the joy of seeing each other in community so we can continue on in this work, because there are days that are heavy. There are days that are very heavy. It can be very violent. And I'm still here, and the code is I refuse to cooperate with my own disappearance. And I hope you all will too. God bless.
Thank you, each of you, for this just amazing conversation. It's been an utter joy to get to know each one of you more. And so what has been most meaningful for me is, just getting to hear your stories and getting to expand my own perspective. It's been an honor, and I'm really grateful that we got the opportunity to share this with other folks who have been tuning in live. And as far as, next steps for me is just having more of these conversations, because my life feels so much richer when I do engage in these kind of conversations and community and learning and witnessing, getting to witness folks and hear about their stories. So for those of you who are watching this, I want to let you know that if you are just leaning into the conversation on race, your conversation doesn't have to look like this, okay? I'm grateful and blessed to be connected to many amazing people who have been out here doing this work for a while. I want you to know that you don't have to have a conversation on race with people across different racial and ethnic backgrounds. It's also really valuable for you to have conversations within your own race. So if that's all that you have access to, that's still a really great place to start. And if you want help finding people to be in conversation with around talking about race and ethnicity, we have some opportunities lined up for you. So wherever you're tuning in, our moderator is going to put in the chat where you can find and join in on those conversations. We have an interest form that we're putting out there about, what topics do you want to be having conversations about in regards to race. Earlier, I shared that the conversation we had today is one of the guides from our conversation pathways, where to begin having a conversation about race. And we also have a number of other conversation pathways, including American aspirations, which includes convos on history and society, as well as convos about race. We have a conversational pathway from intra to interracial. So starting by just talking with your own racial group, some people of color have a convo, some white folks have a convo, and then we come together and have a conversation. We have another pathway around criminal justice. And so there are a lot of resources that we have available for folks to have these conversations. You can literally just go on our website and download the guide and start talking in your community today. But if you want extra support, we're offering it. So just fill out that interest form. Let us know what conversation you're interested in having, and we're going to work on getting some things organized for you. So all the resources for you to get involved and begin having these conversations in your community will be shared for you. And let's see, what else do I want to make sure you all know? We have hundreds of other conversation topics. So if you want to talk about politics, empathy, policing communities, climate change, there is a whole host of hundreds of conversation guides for you to tap into the conversations that matter most to you and your communities. And you can check all of that out at livingroomconversations.org/topics. And we would love if this conversation really resonated for you, if you really got something valuable from this, because we are free and open source and we give all of our information away so that people can be empowered to have these conversations in an accessible way. It's really helpful for folks to give us a donation if this resonated. And you can do that at livingroomconversations.org/donate. So thank you so much to everyone for joining in and being patient as we went a little bit over and had some tech difficulties in the beginning. Thank you so much